Hey guys, tonight we slip into our softest slippers and take a moonlit walk back to ancient Alexandria. Yes, that Alexandria. With its gleaming white columns, thunderous marketplaces, and a library so vast, so legendary, you can practically hear the scrolls whispering secrets as you pass. There's the tang of salt in the air, the scent of lamp oil, and just a little hint of weight. Is that smoke? Oh no, because you're not just visiting Alexandria, you're arriving as it burns. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing who's still awake with me around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on a stone jetty, sea wind tousling your hair, as the port of Alexandria seethes with confusion. Behind you, Roman triremes creak against their moorings, and ahead, a wall of gray-black smoke coils upward, blocking out chunks of the sun. The water smells like salt and charred wood. Somewhere, a goat bleats. Welcome to 48 BCE. It wasn't supposed to be like this. You came for knowledge, maybe to peek at Aristotle's lost volumes, or see if the rumors were true about scrolls on time travel, or at least how to pickle fish with saffron. But Alexandria's great library, the glowing pride of the ancient world, is caught in a different story now. One with fire, betrayal, and probably more egos than a modern tech startup. So what's happening? Julius Caesar has arrived, sword swinging and politics blazing. He's stuck in the middle of a messy Egyptian civil war between Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy the Victorian. Yes, ancient sibling drama. It's basically royal reality TV. Caesar backs Cleopatra. Ptolemy doesn't love that. Things get heated, literally. Roman sources say Caesar, trapped in the palace district, orders his men to torch the ships in Alexandria's harbor to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. The flames leap from mast to dock, from dock to warehouse, and then maybe, possibly to the storerooms, where thousands of scrolls are kept. Not the main library building itself, perhaps, but a satellite location known as the Warehouse of Scrolls near the docks. Ash drifts like snowflakes. Historians still argue whether this fire was the moment the library truly began to die. Some say only a few scrolls were lost. Others believe this was the first great wound. You can almost hear the parchments curling in the heat, each one a tiny scream from a world you'll never know. You wander past stunned scholars, gripping salvaged bundles of papyrus like lifeboats. One scroll smells of cinnamon and mildew. Another seems written in a language you don't recognize symbols. Dots. Maybe an early code. There's no time to ask. Roman soldiers shout from the alleys. Somewhere, Cleopatra is cloaked in shadows, preparing her next move. It's in this chaos that you first understand something painful. Knowledge is fragile. It doesn't matter how brilliant the scroll is, if it's made of paper and stored beside a flaming dock. The Library of Alexandria, at least in part, has been burned. But who exactly set the fire? Caesar's men, an overzealous Egyptian defender, someone who thought those scrolls were better off lost. It's hard to say when everyone's pointing fingers while trying not to get stabbed. You duck into a side street and find a half-burned ledger detailing astronomical observations of Saturn years before the telescope was invented. A cat winds around your leg. The page flakes apart in your hands. Gone. The library, you realize, wasn't a single building, but more of a sprawling complex, the main museum near the royal palace, satellite archives at the port, and possibly storage in nearby temples. Some survived this fire, others didn't. But what's stunning isn't just the destruction, it's what the fire didn't kill. Alexandria's scholars are already arguing about which scrolls should be recopied first. Some are writing from memory. A Greek poet mutters verses as he transcribes. A visiting Indian mathematician sketches diagrams in the dust with a stick. Even now, the hunger for knowledge claws upward through smoke and ruin. And here's your quirky tidbit, for the night rumor has it. The library once held a copy of every book ever brought into the city. By law, ships arriving at the port had to surrender any written material they carried. The scrolls would be copied, and sometimes, just sometimes, the originals would be quietly misplaced into the library's holdings. Thanks for visiting. Enjoy your stay. Sorry about your Aristotle. You move further inland as the sun sinks and the fires wane. Behind you, the sky glows red. Some say the fire only damaged a warehouse. Others believe this was the beginning of the end for the greatest collection of human knowledge the world had ever seen. But here's the part that sticks with you for all its smoke and shouting. This wasn't the only time Alexandria would burn. Far from it. And there's someone you haven't met yet, a woman whose mind could calculate the heavens and whose final walk will change everything. But she doesn't appear, at least, not yet. You wake the next morning on a sun-warmed marble bench, eyelids heavy with ash and the faint ache of too many questions. Alexandria has calmed, for now. The scent of fire lingers, like burnt parchment mixed with seawater and lamp smoke. But the city stirs, merchants shout, sandals slap against stone, and somewhere, a scribe is already dipping his reed pen into ink made from crushed soot and wine sediment. You walk with the morning crowd past the palace walls, where armed Roman guards still cast long shadows. But you're not interested in politics today. Today, you're headed somewhere sacred, somewhere strange. You're going to step into the mind of the ancient world. The Library of Alexandria, in its full prime, isn't just a building. It's a feeling equal parts awe, dust, and anxiety that you've never read enough. Think of it as the intellectual version of stepping into a library the size of a modern university campus. Except, instead of shh, the walls hum with debate, columns soar around you like a forest of limestone, painted with faded blue lotus flowers. The marble floor is cold beneath your feet, and the air smells faintly of old leather, frankincense, and something vinegary, maybe old ink, or the remains of pickled figs left behind by a forgetful philosopher. Scrolls line the walls, stacked in cubbies so high they need ladders, wooden ones, creaking ominously. There are no books yet. Everything's on papyrus rolls or wax tablets. Some are wrapped in linen. Others are sealed in clay jars labeled in Greek, Egyptian Demotic, Aramaic, Sanskrit, even a few unknown scripts that make your head tilt. And yes, there's a catalog system. It's not Dewey Decimal, but it's close. A man named Callimachus created a sprawling reference work called the Pinakes, listing authors, titles, subjects, and a short summary of each scroll. Basically, the ancient world's ultimate reading list. If you're into things like On the Movement of Spherical Bodies, or a treatise on the medical use of crocodile dung, yes, real used, as ancient birth control, effective debatable, you find yourself next to a small classroom carved into a garden courtyard. Students sit cross-legged while a teacher lectures in Greek about the orbits of celestial spheres. He holds a bronze armillary sphere, glinting in the sunlight, and you suddenly feel that tingle like you're watching the universe unfold from a scroll. Mainstream fact time: this library wasn't just about Greece. Its founders wanted all the knowledge: Babylonian star maps, Indian medical texts, Persian poetry, Egyptian theology. It was truly international. The goal was to gather every written work in existence, translated and studied. Sometimes translated badly. You haven't lived until you've seen the Egyptian Book of the Dead reinterpreted as a hygiene guide. And here's a fringe gem: some ancient fringe thinkers believed that the library held scrolls from Atlantis. Yes, that Atlantis. Secret maps, engineering diagrams, supposed blueprints for machines that channeled energy from the stars. Most scholars scoff, but the mystery lingers. After all, how would we know what was lost when what was lost is lost? You wander past statues of gods and muses, their eyes worn smooth by centuries of admiration. There's the muse of astronomy pointing skyward, and the muse of history gazing backward with a slight smirk, as if she knows how all this ends. And then you reach a hallway of wonders. Here, the scrolls aren't just on display, they're part of living research. A man dips a silver needle into a powder and inhales deeply to open the mind to divine knowledge. You cough quietly and step away. In another room, clay tablets are being compared to parchment records from Nubia, measuring rainfall patterns. One chamber hums with whispered arguments about whether the earth moves around the sun. You raise your hand instinctively, then remember you're just a visitor from the future. But not everything here is so noble. Power flows through the library like wine through amphorae. Scrolls are hoarded. Scholars jockey for patronage. The head librarian is a kingmaker, reporting directly to the pharaoh. If your scroll isn't cataloged, it might as well not exist. If you're caught plagiarizing Plato or misquoting Herodotus, your reputation is toast served with olive paste. You pass a young woman copying scrolls. She's left-handed, her fingers stained with indigo, and she hums as she writes. The papyrus crackles softly under her stylus. She looks up and smiles, then flicks a speck of dust off the edge. It's a moment so small, so human, that you almost forget this place is legendary. It's just people, brilliant, curious, frustrating people. Historians still argue whether the library functioned more like a university, a temple, or an archive. Some say it was open only to elite scholars. Others argue it had public reading areas and even reading contests for kids' ancient summer reading challenges. Minus the pizza coupons. The sun begins to dip. The light filtering through the high windows turns the air to gold. You realize hours have passed and you've barely scratched the surface. As you head toward the exit, something catches your eye. A scroll titled simply, "Concerning the Shadows at Noon." You open it carefully, your fingers tingling on the fragile papyrus and read about how Eratosthenes used shadows and a well to measure the Earth's circumference over 2,000 years ago. His estimate less than 1% off, without satellites, just sunlight, geometry, and a clever librarian's hunch. You stare at the scroll, breath caught, somewhere between awe and shame. We rediscovered this much later, of course, but the thought that it was already known so long ago makes the modern world feel strangely late to its own party. You tuck that moment away, like a pressed flower or a soft-spoken truth. Outside, Alexandria flickers with torchlight, and though the library stands for now, whispers echo that the flames may return, that not everyone sees knowledge as sacred. But we're not done yet, because Julius Caesar wasn't the last threat, not even close, and the next one wears robes, not armor. You drift into a warm twilight along the streets of Alexandria, where the smell of roasted chickpeas mingles with fresh ink. There's a certain calm in the air now, as if the city's taken a long breath after its brush with flames. But beneath the quiet, something uneasy simmers like the soft hiss of oil just before it sputters into a fire. You trail your fingers along the smooth limestone walls as you walk. The harbor lies behind you, mostly rebuilt. Ships bob gently on the tide, freshly tarred and stacked with amphorae. But you remember the way it looked not so long ago. Those bright tongues of fire, Roman soldiers shouting, scrolls curling into ash. A small fire, they said, a small fire with an enormous appetite. Let's rewind a bit. It's 48 BCE. Julius Caesar has landed in Alexandria and immediately finds himself in the middle of a soap opera with swords. Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy the Fifth are locked in a civil war over who should rule Egypt. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, sneaks herself into Caesar's palace quarters, rolled up in a rug, yes, really, and charms the sandals off him. Ptolemy, predictably, loses it. Caesar is now besieged in the royal quarter, trapped, outnumbered, irritated. So, in an act that will be debated for millennia, he orders the Roman fleet to be set on fire to stop Ptolemy's reinforcements from seizing it. But here's the thing about fire. It doesn't follow orders. It jumps, leaps, dances, and devours. The flames spread along the wooden piers, up the docks, through the warehouse district, and critically, to the storage buildings near the harbor. These weren't just dusty old storage closets. Many scholars believe they housed a major portion of the library's scrolls, possibly the daughter library attached to the Temple of Serapis, or the warehouses where newly copied texts were held for cataloging. And just like that, tens of thousands of scrolls may have been incinerated in a single blaze. Mainstream historians mostly agree that some part of the library's holdings were lost in the fire. The Roman historian Dio Cassius claims that the flames destroyed a great number of books. Other ancient writers try to be more optimistic or vague. And then there's Plutarch, who suggests the fire was merely collateral damage, unintentional. Caesar's not to blame. He just wanted to stop the ships. Right. And you just wanted one more cookie, not the entire sleeve. So did Caesar really burn the library? Historians still argue whether the fire reached the main library itself or just a nearby archive. Some say Caesar later funded the restoration of scrolls to atone. Others think that's wishful PR. After all, It's not like the Romans were known for being gentle with foreign cultures. They appreciated knowledge, sure, but they also appreciated conquest. You wind through Alexandria's older quarter, where gossip travels faster than camels. One merchant swears he saw Roman soldiers stuffing scrolls into sacks for safekeeping, he says, eyes narrowed. Another claims priests snuck their most sacred texts out under cover of smoke, hiding them in desert caves. Some say Cleopatra herself saved the most precious volumes, stashing them in the labyrinthine cellars of the palace. You can't help but imagine her there, Cleo, wrapped in linen and gold, choosing which scrolls to rescue like picking memories to save from a flood. Does she grab the scroll on Atlantis, the one on advanced Egyptian metallurgy, or a love poem from a scholar she never quite forgot? It's a painfully human moment. If it ever happened, you stop at a small temple courtyard. A scribe, maybe 10 years old, scratches a line of Greek into a wax tablet with intense concentration. You crouch beside him, watching. He's copying a story from Homer, not from memory from a single surviving scroll. A salvaged echo, the future of knowledge, reduced to this boy and his steady hands. Here's something quirky. Ancient scrolls were incredibly perishable. Made from papyrus reeds, they could disintegrate with humidity, insects, fire, or just time. That's partly why we've lost so much. One unlucky day, one damp storeroom, and poof, there goes your treatise on lunar agriculture. But it wasn't just fragility. Sometimes, knowledge was deliberately wiped. Some scrolls were politically inconvenient. Others were considered heretical. Occasionally, a new librarian would purge works he deemed unworthy. Think of it as ancient cancel culture, scroll edition. One philosopher even rewrote older texts in his own voice, passing them off as originals. Ancient plagiarism with a flair for drama. You walk along the palace's outer gardens, and the wind carries a faint scent jasmine, mixed with something sharper. You reach a mosaic-tiled reflecting pool, where a few scrolls have been laid out to dry, water-damaged, smoke-tinged. The ink has bled on some, but they're still here, barely. It makes you wonder if Caesar had never come. Would the library have lasted forever? Maybe not. Alexandria was always a city of tensions, Greek versus Egyptian, native versus foreign, scholar versus priest. The library sat at the intersection of all these forces, vulnerable as it was majestic, a beacon, yes, but also a lightning rod. And besides, the loss wasn't all at once. Most scholars agree that the destruction came in waves, fire by fire, ruler by ruler, year by year. What Caesar's blaze began, others would finish either by accident or design. You sit on a low stone wall, watching the moon rise. Alexandria flickers below, lanterns glowing like fireflies across the cityscape. Somewhere, deep in a hidden archive, scrolls still whisper to each other in ancient tongues. But the ground is already shifting, because after Caesar and Cleopatra fade into marble busts and dusty legends, a new kind of flame will rise, one that claims to be righteous, one that speaks in sermons, and one that burns not just scrolls, but silence into the minds of those who survive. But we'll get there, not tonight. You rest your hand on the stone and feel the chill of ancient history still echoing beneath your fingertips. You wake to the sound of bells, soft, slow, echoing across Alexandria like the hush before a sermon. The sun hasn't fully risen, and the sky is painted that purplish gray that makes you feel like you've accidentally slipped into a dream. But no, this is very real, and this time, the danger doesn't come from generals or emperors. It comes from faith. You walk the city again, but something's changed. Gone are the chatter and marketplace clangor. In their place, whispers, headscarves pulled a little tighter, doors shut a little quicker. There's tension here now, not the chaotic kind of war, but the more dangerous kind, the kind that simmers in silence until it boils over. It's the 4th century CE. Rome has changed. Alexandria has changed. You've stepped into a new empire, one that calls itself Christian. Pagan temples are falling out of favor, and with them, the old ways of learning. Not all Christians are hostile to knowledge. Of course, some are deeply scholarly, but the winds are shifting. You approach the great temple of Serapis, where the library's sister collection, the so-called Serapeum, has been housed since the original structure began to fade. The Serapeum was meant to be both spiritual sanctuary and scroll warehouse, a kind of divine book club hosted by the god of healing and knowledge. Now, the temple is closed. Its giant columns look tired, like they know what's coming. You slip through a side gate, careful not to be seen. The air inside is still, heavy with old incense and soot. Stone statues of gods stare down at you with broken noses and chipped robes. The scrolls are fewer now. Many were moved, hidden, or taken by cautious scholars sensing the turn of the tide. And here comes one of the library's final defenders. Her name is Hypatia. She's not a priest or soldier or queen. She's a philosopher, a mathematician, and a teacher. And she's dazzling, not just in brilliance, though she has plenty of that, but in clarity. She walks into rooms of arguing men and makes them listen. She writes about conic sections and the motion of heavenly bodies. She teaches from Plato, Ptolemy, and Euclid not just by reciting, but by explaining. And she's a woman in a world that's quickly forgetting how to listen to women. Hypatia strolls the streets in flowing robes, surrounded by students, many of them Christian, some pagan, some in between. Her home becomes a school, her lectures legend. People travel across the empire to hear her thoughts on geometry, ethics, the stars. You sit in on one of her outdoor talks. She's sketching ellipses in the sand with a reed, explaining planetary motion. A boy raises his hand and nervously asks, "But if God controls everything, why do the planets move like this?" She pauses, smiles gently. "Perhaps," she says, "God is a geometer." It's a beautiful thought, but outside the circle of her students, Alexandria is unraveling. Mainstream historical fact. In 391 CE, a decree is issued under Emperor Theodosius banning pagan practices and temples. The Christian bishop of Alexandria, Theophilus, takes the opportunity to purge the city. Mobs descend on the Serapeum. The great temple is looted, burned, desecrated. Statues are torn down, shrines smashed. This fringe whisper. Some claim that the scrolls were saved, hidden in desert monasteries, or passed from scholar to scholar. Others say Christian monks secretly preserved the most valuable works. Ironic, perhaps, but not impossible. Faith and knowledge are not always enemies. But what's clear is this: the Serapeum, The last visible remnant of the library's holdings is gone. You walk the site after the riot. Ash clings to everything. The floor is strewn with broken statue heads, shattered pottery, and a few singed scroll fragments that crumble at your touch. The walls are scratched with crude crosses and the names of saints. Even the stone seems to grieve, yet Hypatia remains. For a while, she teaches still, writes still, but the city grows darker around her. Historians still argue whether her death marked the final nail in the library's coffin, but her story is as brutal as it is tragic. It's now 415 CE. Tensions between religious factions are white hot. The new bishop of Alexandria, Cyril, is power-hungry and unforgiving. Political battles play out in sermons and alleys. Hypatia, who speaks calmly and carries logic like a blade, becomes a symbol for some of pagan arrogance, for others of resistance. One afternoon, as she rides through the city in her chariot, yes, chariot she's pulled from it by a Christian mob, what follows is not something to be dwelled on before bed, but it is the end of her, and likely the end of the last embers of the library. After her death, Alexandria's intellectual light dims. Fewer scrolls, fewer scholars. The rhythm of the city shifts. It becomes less a city of questions and more a city of answers, strict, sanctioned, unchallenged. You stand by the edge of the old library site, now just a courtyard of scattered stone and wildflowers, a place tourists might walk by without even realizing what once stood there. You close your eyes and try to hear the echoes Hypatia's voice, the scratching of reeds on papyrus, the hiss of steam from a forgotten experiment. And then a breeze picks up. You think you smell ink. Or is it jasmine again? It's hard to tell. But something remains. Something deeper than scrolls or statues. Maybe it's this knowledge can be copied, burned. Yes, but copied, shared, remembered. And as long as one mind carries a truth, a question, or a spark, nothing is ever fully lost. Still, the fire didn't stop here, because centuries later, another empire would rise, carrying both learning and flame. And what they found in Egypt may surprise you. The wind shifts as you cross the desert's edge, the scent of salt giving way to sand and sun-scorched stone. You're still in Egypt, but Alexandria is far behind you now. Ahead lies a land of silence, camel tracks fading under heat waves, limestone cliffs cracked by time, and palm fronds rustling like parchment. The year is 641 CE. A new force approaches the armies of Islam, led by General Amr ibn al-As, under the command of Caliph Umar. Alexandria, weary from centuries of infighting and imperial shuffleboard, surrenders after a long siege. And in this moment, the last vestiges of ancient knowledge hang by a thread. You walk beside the soldiers as they enter the city. No burning, no looting, not this time. The conquest is surprisingly peaceful. The inhabitants are allowed to continue living their lives. Copts still ring their church bells. Greeks still quote Aristotle. For now, and then someone asks a question. Not just any question, the kind that might change the fate of thousands of scrolls. A local scholar, perhaps a bishop or bureaucrat, the stories vary, tells General Amr about the famous library of Alexandria, It still exists, he says, or parts of it. Rooms filled with ancient knowledge, hidden in temples or storage halls, neglected for decades but intact. The general considers this. The scrolls are impressive, no doubt, priceless, but he needs to ask the caliph first. So he writes to Umar in Medina, asking what should be done with these books. The answer, according to several Islamic-era chroniclers, is chilling in its simplicity. If the books agree with the Quran, they are unnecessary. If they disagree, they are heretical. Destroy them. You feel that line drop like a stone into a well. Silence follows. Mainstream historical fact. There's no contemporary Islamic record of this decree. The story appears in later writings, centuries later, and many modern scholars doubt its authenticity. Some argue it was propaganda, possibly fabricated by anti-Islamic writers to paint the conquest as anti-intellectual. Others think it could have happened but was exaggerated. Historians still argue whether the Islamic conquest led to the final destruction of Alexandria's literary treasures, or simply inherited the ruins of an already shattered institution. But here's what's undeniable. By the mid-7th century, the ancient library is no longer mentioned anywhere, not in official records, not in passing by travelers. It vanishes not in a blaze this time, but in a hush, that eerie kind of loss, the one where nobody notices until it's too late. You pass a scriptorium, a kind of ancient book copying center now shuttered. Its doors are sealed, the courtyard empty except for a few dried quills and broken oil lamps. The scholars are gone, their benches cold. One reed stylus lies on the ground, brittle and untouched. In another version of the story, the scrolls are not burned but recycled, used as fuel for the public baths. According to some tales, it takes 6 months to burn them all. 6 months of heating bathwater with philosophy, history, astronomy, and poetry. It's the kind of detail that would be darkly funny if it weren't so tragic. You duck into a narrow alley to escape the sun. Here, a few monks have gathered around a tiny clay oven. They're speaking in hushed Coptic, baking bread, occasionally glancing at a leather-bound codex, one of the few remaining texts from before the conquest. It's a herbal manual, nothing dangerous, nothing that disagrees. They keep it wrapped in cloth, hidden beneath sacks of flour. And here's something quirky. Early Islamic civilization didn't stay anti-intellectual for long. In fact, within just a few generations, the Islamic world became one of the greatest centers of learning the world has ever seen. Baghdad's house of wisdom, founded in the 8th century, rivaled Alexandria in ambition and brilliance. Arabic scholars translated and preserved countless Greek texts, Aristotle, Galen, Ptolemy. Without them, much of classical knowledge would have been lost to Europe forever. It's one of history's great ironies. The empire accused of destroying Alexandria's legacy may also have rescued it, at least in part. But Alexandria wasn't so lucky. You step into the ruins of a once grand building. Maybe it was a temple, maybe a hall of scrolls. It's hard to tell anymore. The roof is gone. The walls are cracked and crawling with weeds. You kneel beside a pile of dust and fragments, nothing legible, just scraps of memory. You reach for one, and it crumbles in your fingers. That's the thing about libraries. They die quietly, not with a bang, but with neglect. Scrolls disintegrate, ink fades, curiosity dims, and yet something remains. In the dark corners of desert monasteries, Coptic monks continue to copy what they can. In homes and private schools, tiny manuscript collections survive. Alexandria's light hasn't gone out. It's just flickered into smaller flames, scattered across the sands. You sit beneath a fig tree outside the city, sipping bitter tea brewed in a cracked copper pot. A traveler joins you, dusty from weeks on the road. He carries a pouch, and from it, he pulls a single papyrus scroll. What is it, you ask? Medicine, he says. From Galen, translated into Syriac, then Arabic. You hold it carefully. It smells like desert wind and old ink. You think of Hypatia, of Cleopatra, of the nameless boy scribes, of all the scrolls that might have once surrounded this one, and you realize knowledge doesn't die with buildings. It dies when no one asks questions. As night falls, you watch the stars glimmer one by one, the same stars the ancient astronomers charted from the library's rooftop observatory. The sky hasn't changed, and maybe, just maybe, someone out there still remembers how to read it. But we're not quite done yet, because centuries later, long after Alexandria has faded to whispers, explorers, scientists, and dreamers will look back and wonder what exactly was lost, and is it still possible to find it again? It's a strange feeling, returning to Alexandria now, not as a scholar or soldier or curious bystander, but as a seeker of ghosts. The city is quieter in this century. Let's say it's the 18th now, give or take. The Ottoman Empire holds sway, and Alexandria is little more than a sleepy port town clinging to faded grandeur. You walk its cracked streets with sand in your shoes and wind in your ears. No more grand temples, no mighty scholars debating the shape of the cosmos in marble courtyards, just fishermen, spice merchants, and a few dreamy-eyed locals who've heard stories passed down like lullabies about the time their city held the whole world's knowledge in its arms. But you're not here for fish or stories. You're here for the mystery. The Library of Alexandria has become something new, now a legend, a treasure hunt, a beacon for adventurers, archaeologists, and romantics. People begin asking not just how it was destroyed, but where it might still be hiding. Fringe theory alerts some believe parts of the library survived, buried beneath the city in sealed vaults or catacombs. Others think fleeing scholars smuggled scrolls across the Mediterranean, maybe to Italy, or even as far as India and China. Mainstream historical fact, while no scrolls from the ancient library have been definitively identified. Some classical texts, like those by Homer, Euclid, and Herodotus, did survive through later copies and translations. Whether these are remnants of the Alexandrian archive or lucky duplicates from elsewhere, no one really knows. Historians still argue whether the Great Library was ever a single unified building or more of a sprawling network of collections scattered through temples, palaces, and private homes. If the latter is true, then it may not have been burned in one dramatic moment. It may have simply melted away over centuries. You find yourself drawn to the harbor. It's quieter now, but you can still hear echoes waves slapping ancient stones, gulls crying overhead, the creak of wooden ships. You walk along the old dock where Ptolemaic ships once arrived loaded with books borrowed from other cities. You imagine the scribes rushing down to collect them, hurriedly making copies before returning the originals, often reluctantly, and sometimes not at all. And then you spot it, a stone foundation beneath a modern warehouse, crumbling walls leading underground. Archaeologists have begun digging here, suspecting this might be part of the ancient royal quarter. You crouch beside the site, brushing dust from what looks like a fragment of column fluted, scorched, but unmistakably Hellenistic. Could this have once supported the ceiling of the library itself? Maybe, or maybe not. You won't get a definitive answer. Not today. But that's the thing about mysteries. They don't always want to be solved. Sometimes, they just want to be felt. You head to a small cafe tucked beside an old mosque, where a French scholar is sketching a map. His tea has long gone cold. Do you think it still exists, you ask? He doesn't look up. The library, he says, it never died. Not really. And in a way, he's right, because in the Enlightenment salons of Paris, in the drawing rooms of London, in the quiet corners of Cairo's universities, the spirit of Alexandria is rising again. Scholars are translating Arabic manuscripts back into Latin and Greek. They're rediscovering ancient ideas, geometry, anatomy, astronomy, and marveling at how advanced they were. You flip through one such manuscript, a weathered copy of Ptolemy's Almagest. Its diagrams precise, its margins scribbled with generations of notes in 3 different languages. The original might have been copied 100 times since it sat on a shelf in Alexandria. But the knowledge, it's intact. Here's something quirky Napoleon Bonaparte. During his Egyptian campaign in 1798, brings with him a whole team of scientists, engineers, and historians. He wants to conquer Egypt, yes, but also to understand it, to excavate it, to learn from it. Some say he even tried to find the lost library. He doesn't, of course, but his obsession with ancient knowledge sparks a global wave of interest in Egyptian antiquity. Museums fill with artifacts. Hieroglyphs are decoded. Obelisks are shipped across oceans like prizes, not always ethically, but undeniably enthusiastically. And somewhere along the line, people stop asking what burned and start asking what was preserved. You return to the sea one last time. The breeze is cool. The stars are sharp. You lie back on a smooth rock, waves lapping nearby, and think about how long it's been since the first scroll was written, about how ink and papyrus can fade, but curiosity, that stubborn little ember, never does. And you remember Hypatia, sketching ellipses in the sand. You remember Cleopatra, clutching her scroll of Plato while Rome closed in. You remember the monks, the scribes, the explorers, the dreamers, and you realize they didn't just preserve knowledge, they carried it across centuries, across continents, across war, fire, and forgetfulness. That's what makes the library immortal. Not the marble, not the scrolls, the questions. Still, there's one more chapter to this story, because while Alexandria's past smolders in mystery, its future is about to light up with a gleam so bold, it almost feels like redemption. It's the year 2002, and you're standing once again on the shores of Alexandria, this time in sneakers, not sandals. The city hums with traffic. Cell phones chirp like mechanical crickets, and tuk-tuks dart between taxis in an eternal, chaotic ballet. And yet, right here on the edge of the Mediterranean, something quietly monumental has returned. You round a corner, and there it is, a curved building of glass and granite, gleaming like a half-buried sun rising from the sea. The Bibliotheca Alexandrina, a new library, built on the very soil that once bore the weight of the ancient world's greatest treasure trove. You walk toward it, heart thumping. It's not just a building, it's a statement. We remember the modern bibliotheca is more than a tribute, it's a resurrection, designed by the Norwegian architectural firm Snohetta. It houses millions of books, a planetarium, museums, and even ancient manuscripts preserved on microfilm. Its circular form, sloping toward the sea, symbolizes the cyclical nature of knowledge, how it's lost, found, and lost again. And here's your first real stop, the atrium. It opens up like a glass canyon, shafts of light spilling across alabaster walls. You can almost hear the whispers of Hypatia's chalk, Cleopatra's sandals, the creak of burning scrolls. Except this time, the smell is cleaner, polished marble, fresh ink, air conditioning. Mainstream historical fact, the new library isn't on the exact site of the original. No one knows precisely where the ancient library stood, but this location near the supposed royal quarter is the closest living memory could get, and maybe that's enough. You run your fingers along a granite wall etched with 120 scripts from around the world: Braille, Cyrillic, Phoenician, Sanskrit, Arabic, hieroglyphs, a sensory detail that feels sacred rough under your fingertips, like time itself is carved into stone. And here comes something quirky. The bibliotheca was seeded not just with Egyptian books, but with donations from libraries around the world, including a complete digital copy of the Internet Archive. Yes, in a way, Alexandria now holds not just the ancient world's wisdom, but ours too, cat memes and all. But of course, no story about knowledge would be complete without a little controversy. Historians still argue whether this modern library can really claim the legacy of the original. Some say it's too clean, too digital, too curated. Others insist it's the perfect metaphor rebuilt not from ashes, but ambition. Still others wonder, why now? Why build it here? After centuries of silence, you wander into the rare manuscripts room. The lights dim automatically as you enter. Behind a pane of bulletproof glass lies a 10th century Arabic copy of Galen's medical texts. Yes, Galen, whose original works once lived in the ancient library. It's like finding a whisper that survived 1,000 storms. And in a nearby exhibit, ancient Coptic scrolls, early Quranic calligraphy, a digitized version of Hypatia's alleged commentaries, though modern scholars debate the authenticity. You pause at a replica of a scroll from the lost comedy plays of Menander. You don't recognize the lines, but you laugh anyway. Maybe that's enough. Then, a moment of emotional weight. A group of school children files in 8, maybe 9 years old. One girl in a sunflower dress pauses in front of the planetarium, her eyes wide, her mouth in a silent wow. She doesn't know the full story of this place, not yet, but she knows it matters. That's what libraries do, isn't it? They don't just collect facts, they plant seeds. You settle into a reading nook, sunlight dappling the pages of a book on ancient papyrus making. A soft mechanical hum rises as robotic shelves shift behind the walls, retrieving requests, storing backups, feeding curiosity with smooth, silent precision. But even here, in the glow of screens and soft lighting, something primitive lingers, a hunger to know what came before, to piece together what fire and time tried to erase. And so the question hangs in the air once more: who really burned the Library of Alexandria? The answer isn't simple. Was it Sazer's fire, the Christian mobs, the Muslim conquerors? Was it gradual rot, or ideological pruning neglect? Maybe. Or the weight of too many empires, using knowledge as kindling for power. In truth, it was all of them, and none of them, because what killed the library wasn't just one fire, but many small ones, over centuries, in hearts that stopped asking questions. But what rebuilt it? That's easier to answer. You did. Every time you opened a book, followed a strange idea, stayed up too late reading theories on who really destroyed what. Every time someone somewhere chose to preserve instead of purge, to copy instead of destroy, to ask instead of accept, you close your book, stand slowly, stretch, and as the sun begins to set outside, painting the library's glass walls with a shimmer of gold, you walk to the edge of the balcony. Below you, people from all over the world move like ants through exhibits, classes, readings, and lectures. None of them are Hypatia. None are Cleopatra. None are Aristotle's ghost. But all of them are part of the same story. And there's just one more piece left to tell. One last flicker of light before we sleep. So here we are, full circle. You're standing at the edge of a story that spans over 2,000 years. And as the wind from the sea brushes your cheek, it doesn't feel like history anymore. It feels present, ongoing, alive, like the Library of Alexandria itself never truly vanished, just went underground, into dreams and dust. And now, slowly, it's rising again. You watch the last light fade behind the new bibliotheca's curved dome, and for a moment, it's easy to forget the fires, the mobs, the scrolls turning to ash. Easy to believe that knowledge, like a phoenix, always finds a way back. And maybe that's true, but not without cost. So let's do the impossible one last time. Let's go back not in centuries, but in heartbeats to the very first question you asked. Who really burned the Library of Alexandria, and why? Let's consider all the players again. In the dim quiet of evening, there was Caesar, accidental arsonist, conqueror distracted by glory. He likely didn't mean to destroy the library, but war has never been a careful art. His fire may have only singed the outer storage rooms, or it may have done far more. The reports are contradictory, sparse. You can almost hear the crackle of uncertainty more clearly than the fire itself. Then there were the Christians of the 4th century zealots, sure, but also desperate people living in a crumbling empire, watching old gods lose their grip. When they tore down the Serapeum, they weren't just smashing marble, they were reclaiming space, power, identity. Was that an excuse for destroying scrolls? Not at all, but it was a reason. The Muslims who arrived later, under Caliph Omar, well, that's the strangest bit of all. Some say his soldiers burned books because they contradicted the Quran. Others say that story was fabricated centuries later, a smear campaign with no basis in fact. Historians still argue whether the caliph's fire ever actually happened or if it's just another myth built on silence. But maybe, just maybe, the real answer isn't a person. Maybe it's a pattern. The library was never built to survive empires. It was built to challenge them, and that, right there, is the most dangerous thing you can do with knowledge. Refuse to let it be controlled. It wasn't one man with a torch who burned the library. It was every moment a ruler feared what was written more than what was wielded. Every time truth became inconvenient. Every time a scroll sat unopened because someone chose not to be curious. But here's the real twist. The library didn't die. Not really. You carry it every time you question what you're told. Every time you dig deeper. Every time you whisper, but what if instead of nodding along? And in that way, the Library of Alexandria might be the most dangerous building in history because it taught us to think beyond our cages. There's something haunting about that, isn't there? But also something freeing. You wander down from the library steps now. The sea is quiet. The streetlights buzz. Somewhere, a cat yowls in the distance, as if reminding you that even in a city built on memory, life insists on being lived. You pass a bookstore still open, its window aglow. Inside, two teenagers are arguing Plato versus Aristotle with TikTok logic and full eye rolls. It's glorious. There's a tactile ache in your chest. Not grief, exactly, more like awe. The kind that comes when you realize how fragile everything is. Scrolls, cities, civilizations, all can vanish. But ideas, those are slippery. They hide. They wait. They resurface. You glance up at the stars, imagining ancient astronomers sketching them in ink made from soot and gum. Hypatia did that. So did Aristarchus, Eratosthenes, Ptolemy. Each looked up at the same sky and dared to chart it. Now it's your turn. So you ask the final question, not who destroyed the library, but who might build the next one. And where, in Alexandria, again, maybe, or maybe online, in your town, in your home, or even just in your head. Because the truth is, the fire never stopped. It just changed form. And now that you know that, you'll never look at a library, ancient or modern, the same way again. And with that, it's time to let go of the questions. Time to step back from the marble and smoke and mystery. Time to wind down. But don't worry, the library will still be here in the morning. You can visit anytime. Let's slow everything now. The footsteps fade, the streetlights dim, and the weight of 20 centuries settles not like a burden, but like a blanket, soft, warm, familiar. You're lying now, perhaps in bed, or maybe just imagining it. A soft pillow beneath your head, the hush of night wrapping around your shoulders. The sea outside Alexandria grows quiet, waves brushing the shore like a mother soothing a child. You think of scrolls tucked gently into wooden shelves, of dusty fingers turning pages, of the smell of ink and time. There's a calm that comes with understanding that even the greatest library in the world wasn't about perfection or permanence. It was about reaching, stretching, collecting the thoughts of thousands across continents and years, and holding them in one place, if only briefly. You let your breathing slow. Inhale curiosity, exhale fear. You are part of this story now, part of the long, quiet line of people who care enough to ask hard questions, who believe that ideas matter, that stories have weight, that maybe, just maybe, what we preserve says more about us than what we build. And as your eyes grow heavy and the edges of the world blur, you feel that same spark Hypatia must have felt, looking up at the stars, that same quiet thrill of knowing you don't have all the answers, and that's exactly how it should be. The night is deep now, the questions are resting, and so are you. The story is over. See you tomorrow night. Sweet dreams.